Saylor just sold some Bitcoin. 32 Bitcoin to be exact.
The most important thing to know is it's all over. We're going to zero. Panic, sell everything. There's like this odd disconnect right now. People don't like that Saylor says MSTR is amplified Bitcoin, but it is true. It is amplified Bitcoin.
So why is everything else up while Bitcoin is languishing?
People are rebalancing their portfolios. Bitcoin is not the trendy thing right now, but this is the opportunity. There's raw demand. Everything that flows out must flow back in. It's just like the tide. Bitcoin is going to 1 million, and I just cannot rationalize how people wouldn't front run that. That's what you have to really prepare yourself for. The day that all the capital comes to Bitcoin and there's not a lot of Bitcoin left. It's not easy, but you just have to be patient.
Bitcoin is crashing, the sky is falling, and Saylor just sold 32 Bitcoin. Welcome back to the Bitcoin News Channel. I'm your host, Rob Wallace. Share this video with one person who wants to understand what the heck is going on with Bitcoin right now. Today, I'm joined by Samson Mow, CEO of Jan3, and the man flying around the world to talk to heads of state and central banks about Bitcoin adoption. We get into why Saylor selling is a feature and not a betrayal, and how the death spiral talk is the same FUD we heard about mining years ago. Why Samson thinks that the 4-year cycle is complete rubbish, and why that means Bitcoin can rocket higher when people least expect it. And how Iran taking Bitcoin to move ships through the Strait of Hormuz proves that neutral money is for everyone, even your enemies. It's times like this that you need to hear from one of Bitcoin's most well-versed and staunch defenders. All right, Samson Mow, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here, Rob.
Absolutely. I'm so glad to have you here. We are in some tumultuous markets when it comes to Bitcoin. Everything else is just shooting through the roof, and Bitcoin has stayed lingering here. And then we got the news today. Saylor just sold some Bitcoin. 32 Bitcoin to be exact, $2.5 million worth out of 843,000 Bitcoin. Explain this to us. What does this mean? And why did he go back on never sell your Bitcoin?
Well, the most important thing to know is it's all over. We're going to zero. Saylor selling. So panic, sell everything, sell all your stocks too. Just like wrap it all up.
Yes, that's the feeling out there.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think today there was a drop. There's a dip because of the Iran conflict, which is funny because, we had a team call around the same time for Jan 3 Monday team call. And we were like wondering what's causing the price drop? Why are we down? And the only news that we all saw was that Saylor sold 32 Bitcoin. And then, we searched a bit more and we found, okay, it's the Iran conflict escalating. So there's like this odd disconnect right now where the algorithm is not promoting the conflict at all. And we have to actually search for it proactively to see what's going on, which is just really weird, right? But the thing that does pop up is Saylor selling the 32 coins. But I don't think it's a big deal. It's 32 coins. And this is not the first time that strategy has sold. They have sold in the past, I think, for tax loss harvesting and tax optimization. So I think people are angry that Saylor didn't follow his sound bites that, never sell your Bitcoin. But, that is more of a rule of thumb that you don't sell your Bitcoin willy-nilly for no reason or because you're fearful. You can sell your Bitcoin, obviously. Otherwise, there will be no economy. There will be no circular economy, and there's no need for Bitcoin wallets. We don't need to make Aqua. We don't need to do anything. We just, all accumulate. But it is a tactical move to sell Bitcoin in his case because he needs to have a channel to fund the dividends on the preferreds. And I don't think it should be unexpected. Either he'll dilute common or he will sell Bitcoin, but eventually something has to fund the dividend. It doesn't get funded out of nowhere. And even in the case of the Bitcoin bonds that I designed, there was a mechanism too. So a nation state would buy Bitcoin with the capital raise, but they will also sell or mark to market Bitcoin to pay back the principal, firstly, and second, to share upside. So selling Bitcoin, there's nothing wrong with it as long as you're not selling for the wrong reasons. If you're a net accumulator, which strategy and Saylor will be, then it's fine because he's selling a little bit of Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin. And what he's doing is stripping out the volatility. And it's the same case for the Bitcoin bonds. You strip out the volatility for a different investor class, a different segment of investors, and you can sell some of it to pay the dividends and net gain Bitcoin in the end too.
Yes, and we did see this back in 2022. He sold around 700 Bitcoin in December of 22 in order to do some tax loss harvesting, and then bought back 800 more the next week, completely negating the sale. So that there is some precedent for it. And there also is the fact that in order to get included in the S&P 500, the S&P looking at MSTR said that it's sort of a weakness that he doesn't sell, that he can't sell, right? And so he's sort of inoculating the market to get used to the fact that he can in order to pay for these preferreds. But there are some people who say that this has gotten to a point where it's sort of like there has to be a loser here between MSTR, BTC, and STRC. That they're sort of holding each other hostage. There's a post here from Jeff Dorman, and he said that the plan may just be selling BTC, which he will have to do eventually, but if he does, while BTC is in a death spiral, it's going to crush BTC and MSTR. So again, why buy back the debt now when you're forced to and force your hand sooner than you have to? Maybe he is going to refinance those converts with new, longer dated converts. He has sworn off converts, so I doubt it, but that would at least be logically sense. So TLDR, this is the first time that MSTR, BTC, and pref holders are really in a bind. Someone is going to lose badly, and it will happen in the next 4 months. What's your response to that?
Well, this is not the first time we've heard these sort of fear-mongering type posts, and I just don't think that's the case. I mean, we've been hearing for ages about the mining death spiral. When miners shut down and prices down, more miners will shut down, and it's just going to continue down forever and go to zero. And I don't think it's the case at all for strategy and all the different holders of MSTR, STRC, and BTC. I think it works together very well. Again, the instrument strips out volatility and taps into a new asset class. And people don't like that Saylor says MSTR is amplified Bitcoin, but it is true. It is amplified Bitcoin. It is amplified Bitcoin in both directions. When Bitcoin goes down, MSTR goes down more. When Bitcoin goes up, MSTR will go up more. It is amplified, whether you like it or not, and it's not only one direction. So I think the balance works out, and I don't think a lot of people can see how it works out. They're making the wrong assumption on various things. Like they're assuming the dividend will never decrease, and I think that's a mistake. And they're assuming that Bitcoin won't go up, which is also a mistake too. So I think net of everything does work together well, and it is a very well-oiled machine. Now, the part about Saylor buying back bonds, buying back debt, I think people just don't like the idea that he's not buying more Bitcoin, right? But it is financial planning. It is corporate planning of how to manage finances. And I think it is, I didn't read all the details into it, but I'm pretty sure it was net accretive to shareholders by buying back the debt at a discount now. So I guess to all the haters, you have to just ask yourself, like, if you're that good at financial engineering, then how come you don't have this vehicle on the market that is buying massive amounts of Bitcoin, getting to 1 million coins soon?
That is very true. Well, you have said in the past that you no longer really believe in the cycles, but it does seem as if the cycles are playing out as many have said that they would, right? 2026 would be this bear year. 1010, something did seem to break in the market, and we've been dealing with the ramifications ever since. So what is your perspective now on the cycles, and how much longer will this bear market last?
I still don't believe in the cycles. They're just coincidence. And, it can continue forward in the future. You might have another apparent cycle. You might have one more after that. Who knows? But it is just not the way things work. If the cycles were ironclad, and maybe you could say that they were driven by the halving, but I don't think the halving is that material anymore, especially when the supply is so low from mined Bitcoin relative to the existing supply, and the raw demand for mined Bitcoin. Like, I think Strategy is buying multiple times of the mined Bitcoin already for this year, and we're only in June. So that's not the cycle. Could it be a political cycle? I don't know, but these things just happen to line up, and they might continue to line up, but there is no reason in math or physics or anything that says Bitcoin must follow this 4-year trajectory forever.
Yes, I agree with that. And there's the business cycle, some people say it's aligned to, or the election cycle. Midterm years seem to be very hard for Bitcoin. But nonetheless, we are here and we have been dealing with a hard time since 1010, right? We did track along with software stocks for most of that time, crashing along with them in February. But after they went sideways for a number of months, they have since rebounded and Bitcoin has not. So why is everything else up while Bitcoin is languishing?
It's difficult to say. It could be that people are rebalancing their portfolios in anticipation of some of the big AI company IPOs coming. I think SpaceX is one that people are really salivating over, and then there's Anthropic and everything. But these things come and they go, and it's not a sure thing that buying the IPO is a good idea, especially at these valuations. These are very, very high valuations. But, people are generally sheep and they follow what's the trendy thing to put your money into. And I think it's just that Bitcoin is not the trendy thing right now. And that's probably what's keeping us down. But this is the opportunity for the true believers to accumulate. There are a lot of people out there that still are buying Bitcoin, and I think that fact is lost sometimes because you're focused on the ETFs, you're focused on strategy and other treasury companies, Strive, and everyone else. But there are just normal people buying Bitcoin every day. There's raw demand. There are the plebs that are DCAing every single day, every week, every month, and other big holders that are not publicly talking about it that are accumulating too. So net of it all, I would say we're still in a very good situation with Bitcoin. It's just the broader market sentiment seems to be looking at other things, right? The current thing. And that's just an opportunity for people to understand Bitcoin. So if you look at the AI stocks or even tech stocks in general, all of those companies eventually have to store value somewhere, right? Like if you look at SpaceX, they have Bitcoin on balance sheet. If they successfully do their IPO and they raise a bunch of capital, or NVIDIA or Anthropic, they have a lot of revenues and they want to keep their money, eventually someone has to reach that same conclusion as Saylor did and realize that keeping your money in fiat money is a melting ice cube and it'll come back to Bitcoin. And when those big players start moving back to Bitcoin, the retail investors will follow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that it was revealed that SpaceX has over 18,000 Bitcoin on its balance sheet. And if they were to combine with Tesla, they'd have over 30,000 Bitcoin, moving them up to number 5 on the list of Bitcoin treasury companies. So let's go back to the Bitcoin treasury companies. There has been some pushback from the community on them. I think right now, just while Bitcoin is down, Bitcoiners tend to fight with each other, right? So there's been some bickering back and forth. We saw Odell say some bad stuff about Bitcoin treasury companies. Then you responded, Bitcoin is permissionless, decentralized, neutral money for us, not for the people wearing orange ties, ETFs, or nation states. So tell us about that statement.
Well, I wasn't subtweeting Odell. I saw a lot of sentiment. Like, I just scroll sometimes and I don't know who said what, but that was my summation of what the general environment is towards everything right now. And as you said, when things are going sideways, everyone wants to pick a fight with someone else, right? We're not happy at this time. But I've seen someone say the ETFs were the worst thing that could happen to Bitcoin because we've had, I think, 11 days of outflows now. But everything that flows out must flow back in. It's just like the tide. It ebbs and it wanes sometimes. And I think, people were also critiquing like nation states buying Bitcoin and, politicians rug pulling and not delivering. And I think that's my take on the whole vibe. And obviously some people are mad at the orange ties too. But, permissionless neutral money is for everyone. There's that saying, Bitcoin is for enemies. So you can not like that people are using Bitcoin in a certain way, but that's just the nature of the beast. And, I think Iran is now taking Bitcoin for insurance on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Is that okay? Like, if you can define what anybody, any nation, or any company can do with Bitcoin, then there's a problem there. You've gone right back to the fiat system, and that's exactly what they do. When Russia attacked Ukraine. Okay, well, we're going to cut them off, you know. So I don't think people realize what they're saying when they're saying it. But if you want neutral money, you have to be okay with neutral money.
How many apps does it take to manage your Bitcoin? One to buy, one to send, one for Lightning, and another for loans. That's a lot of friction. Well, now there's Rhino. Listen to the end, and I'll tell you how they'll set you up with $10 of free Bitcoin. Rhino is a next-generation Bitcoin app that makes living on Bitcoin easy. At Rhino, you can buy Bitcoin with zero fees. Get a Bitcoin-backed loan right in the app. Move cash globally over Bitcoin rails fast and easy. Automate your stacking with a DCA plan, so your stack is growing, whether the market is up, down, or you're touching grass. And it doesn't stop there. Bill pay, debit and credit cards, as well as retirement accounts are all coming soon. At Rhino, your Bitcoin is never rehypothecated. Security comes first, with biometric verification, 24/7 fraud protection, and the ability to move your Bitcoin to self-custody whenever you're ready. Click the link below in the description and download Rhino for iOS or Android. Use code BitcoinNews and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin right into your wallet to start you on your stacking journey. Get the most Bitcoin for your dollar with Rhino.
And that does mean that companies like Strategy will build products, and maybe Saylor will say something like, you know, we turn Bitcoin into money, and it doesn't really matter. He's saying something. It's a marketing thing, and you should just let him say it. Like, it doesn't change the fact that Bitcoin is money. I've had people reply to that thread and say, well, we need to fight for Bitcoin and make Bitcoin money. Like, that's not how it works. Like, what are you going to do? Use Bitcoin as money harder? Like, you know, spend harder? I don't know what you do. Like, and then someone else critiqued and saying, well, nation states mining Bitcoin, do you approve of that? And I'm like, yes, the nation states mining Bitcoin is a good thing. And he quoted Mises and said, well, it's crowding out the Bitcoiners and they're getting less Bitcoin because nation states can mine at a loss and all that. But, you know, these are all very good things. But exactly how does your feelings about it impact the world? Like, yes, you can disapprove of a nation state mining Bitcoin or holding Bitcoin, but does that change anything? Because nation states want what is valuable. If it wasn't Bitcoin, it would be bottle caps. Let's say we all traded bottle caps and we thought bottle caps are great. The nation state would want bottle caps eventually because that's what they need. They want money, and Bitcoin is money. So it's a natural evolution that they will want Bitcoin or to mine Bitcoin. But you can complain about that all you want, but it doesn't really change anything. And I think actually it's like thinking a few steps ahead or playing 4D chess, right? If every nation state is mining, that guarantees the decentralization of the network because they'll just have a mining operation and they won't even know it's there. I mean, just think of how many systems are still running in the government that are not looked after anymore. They're just tucked away in some office somewhere, churning away. No one knows how to maintain it. No one even knows it exists anymore. That's kind of the end goal, that you have Bitcoin mining everywhere and countries are mining and they're just securing the network. And actually that will protect it from attacks because they're not actively participating in attempts to change things or upgrade things, right? It kind of gives you this safety cushion. And also getting countries or nation states to adopt Bitcoin in some way is separation of money and state. Separation of money and state is not that you starve the government and you bankrupt them by not giving them your Bitcoin, because they have a monopoly on force. They can get money or financing in many, many ways, even restriction of your movement across borders. But if you can separate the printing ability, that actually starts to trigger a cascading effect of positives, which is you have a system now based on sound money, on hard money that cannot be duplicated and printed. And that has trickle-down effects, like the people in the government will understand money better, and they will have better informed policies, and they will tend towards the Bitcoin ethos and towards freedom. So it's a really subtle thing, but I think people miss it, and they're looking at a very obvious thing right in front of them, which is, you know, this group that I don't like is using Bitcoin. Well, I need to be outraged.
Yes.
Well, go for it.
Exactly.
And then tell me how that went.
Yeah. Bitcoin is for enemies, and it's for everyone from Michael Saylor to you and I to the IRGC, who is charging a toll to get through the Strait of Hormuz in Bitcoin. In terms of this news, you study, of course, nation-state adoption of Bitcoin. You help spread it. How big was this on your radar? Do you think this changes the math when it comes to nation-state adoption for Bitcoin?
The Iranian war?
The fact that Iran is accepting Bitcoin as a toll through the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, it does change things, and I think it's interesting because we've been saying this for 15 years that you want Bitcoin because it's censorship resistant, and it's funny how people have to go through the hurdles and understand, right? Like if you go back to Russia, Ukraine, they could have preempted that by adopting Bitcoin earlier on, but no, they need to get cut off first, and then they see, okay, well, keeping your funds in some other central bank is not a great idea, right? And then I think a bunch of stablecoins and crypto were seized from Iran too, and we could have easily told them that was going to happen because everything other than Bitcoin is centralized, but they have to go through it firsthand. And now they've reached the conclusion, which is, yeah, we want Bitcoin because that is permissionless, right? And then what's the next step after that? It's that, well, we need to mine Bitcoin so that we can transact freely because, technically you could block a Bitcoin transaction, by blacklisting and preventing mining entities from mining that transaction. In theory. I don't know about in practice, but in theory. So it's all playing out as it should play out. It's just amusing to me that people have to go through the learning process instead of just learning.
Yes. As humans, we like to get our fingers burned before we take the lesson. Absolutely. But one thing you just mentioned before is the fact that mining is super important to have hash rate within your own jurisdiction. And right now we see over a third of all hash rate within America. But because of this Iran conflict, we're probably going to see some major energy disruption around the world. Do you think that this will be a boon for Bitcoin mining in different countries as they realize that this helps find stranded energy and develop it and create a native energy ecosystem within their own countries?
Well, we've been talking about that for a long time too. And the benefits of tapping into stranded energy, using flared gas to mine Bitcoin to help the environment. There's just so many benefits. And I don't think countries really look at that and say, well, we should do that because it's a good thing. It's more reactionary. So it's more about, we probably should have some mining so that we can make sure that we mine our own transactions. And this is where I see things moving towards. It's more about necessity than about just usefulness and helpfulness.
Yes, that is how humans work this. Okay, so let's move on to the sort of the AI situation that we have going on. That is definitely all over the headlines. The biggest story in the world right now, of course, is AI, how it is going to change our day-to-day lifestyle. And of course, it's been the rise of agents this year has been the main story of 2026. And you guys over at Aqua are building Agentic Aqua, a Bitcoin wallet for agents. How does this work and what is the main benefit of it?
Right. So Agentic Aqua is two things packaged together. It's a CLI interface to interface and manage your wallets, and it's also an MCP server too. So you can kind of point your agent to set up a wallet and start transacting. So we did a demo where we made an agent wallet and had it buy something over Bitrefill, which is kind of cool. But I think the future is really going to be agentic commerce. People will just delegate that part of their lives away. And, it is a hot wallet, but, so is your wallet on your phone. And that's what Aqua is too. It's a mobile wallet, it's a hot wallet. An agent wallet is a hot wallet, but a little bit hotter because an agent can do things with it. But I think it's acceptable if it's smaller transactions and you top it up every so often. You can risk losing $100 because your agent bought something by accident. And people will also buy things by accident too. So I think once the norm is spread and people understand the power of using agents to conduct business, then I think you're going to see more and more people just allocating that part of their lives, delegating that part of their lives to agents. So that's largely the reason to build Agentic Aqua, because we see this is the frontier. Your own wallet, hardware wallets, those will still exist, but a good chunk of your life will be done by agents. Payroll could be done by agents, right? And there's different things that we can evolve the agent into with better checks and balances and things like that. But definitely it is going to be largely autonomous in the future. And I think we just pushed an update out today for Agentic Aqua where you can now swap liquid USDT for other stablecoins over Sideshift and Changely. And there's more stuff coming down the pipe. But yeah, it's a definitely very exciting time, and the world is in a very interesting place of change where everything is happening seemingly all at once.
Yeah. And the great debate, I think, when it comes to agents and transactions is what will they use, right? What will be the native currency of agents? Right now, it seems as if there's a strong push for stablecoins, but we as Bitcoiners think that if these things are actually intelligent, the incentives will push them to Bitcoin eventually. Where do you see it playing out?
Well, I think the agent should understand that Bitcoin is ultimately the best form factor to transact in and store value in. But as you said, there is a big push. I think a lot of the stablecoin issuers are trying to find this new use case for stablecoins. But stablecoins are only useful so long as you're allowed to use them. And I think eventually that utility might start to narrow as they become more popular because they can be regulated and controlled. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think we've built up an interesting body of knowledge. A lot of Bitcoiners might think, if I'm posting on X or Reddit or wherever they post for this long and it's not been useful. But actually, no, that's all training data. So the Bitcoin maximalist mindset is deeply ingrained into AI data sets. So if you ask an AI about something, you're going to get this Bitcoin maximalist lean from it. I've seen that come up from different conversations in different places, which is really, really interesting. But everything we do, every time we insult shitcoins, it's helping out the cause.
+1 for the data set. And then you yourself, how are you using AI and agents in your day-to-day life?
I've got an interesting setup. I'm using a lot of different things right now. I'm using Claude just within the Claude app. I have my own setup using some open source stuff, and I'm also using Cursor. So I'm kind of just jumping between all these different tools depending on what I'm doing at any given time. And there's pros and cons with everything. The whole tool set is not that mature yet. I think the real breakthrough will be, I think Claude might be able to do it, but it is allowing cross collaboration with AI. So if you look at the Claude desktop app, you can sort of collaborate, but it's not really collaborative yet. You can't collaboratively edit documents. You can't edit inline manually. But once it gets there, and it's like Google Docs, but with AI augmentation that is multiplayer, I think that will be a big productivity shift for organizations. You can kind of jury rig it yourself, but there's no simple out of the box Google Docs type interface right now, it seems. But yeah, like overall, I would say everything is so powerful. Like I'm able to do things solo that would take me a week in a couple hours, and I can increase productivity maybe 5 times or 10 times, depending on the task. But it's a big game changer having all these tools at your disposal.
It is. And has it changed day to day at Jan3 or Aqua? Like you guys integrating AI into the business?
We're integrating it a lot into the development pipeline. And I think for us, it's not as impactful, I would say, as like, if your startup is doing a website, because we still need human review of every single line of code, but we are using tools to speed that up. Also the review process, building testing for all the different things, and also creation of code. But at the end of the day, every single line goes through a human and everything is checked and tested. So we don't have the benefit of I think Anthropic, they're just cranking it out and throwing it out there, right? Because, so what if there's a bug, we'll fix it later. But for a wallet, you can't really do that. But Alex Bragan, our CTO, he's been pushing this a lot. We have Tobias Wupperfield. He's our head of AI, and he's also implementing a lot of this tech into our whole development pipeline. So I would say we're pretty integrated with all the AI tools right now, and it's definitely allowing us to speed up development a lot.
When it comes to development, another project that you've been helping to spearhead is Production Ready, another implementation of Bitcoin. Could you tell the audience what exactly Production Ready is and where is it in terms of its development?
Right. So just to clarify, Production Ready is the nonprofit that is created to fund education and a third Bitcoin client. Sometimes people conflate the two and they say, "Oh, production ready is the client. Where's the client?" No, it's the foundation that will be fundraising and funding developers. And we've been talking to a number of developers to start working on it, but we're still in the fundraising stage right now. So you can find out more on productionready.org. It's started by me, Jimmy Song, Parker Lewis, and John Ratcliffe. And there's a lot of interest in sort of decentralizing Bitcoin client development. So we've had a number of donors already. Jimmy and team went to the Bitcoin conference in Vegas, and a lot of people are interested too, that we have more diverse clients with different ideologies behind them. And I think for us, it's conservatism, not political conservatism, but development conservatism. So minimizing the things that are going in, more focus on testing, making sure that critical bug fixes, security patches are all backported so that you can have a reliable client without changing things. Because one of the benefits of Bitcoin is you shouldn't have to chase the latest thing. If you wanted that, then there's Ethereum and all those other blockchain things. They're all competing on having the latest thing. And that's not really Bitcoin, right? I think for Bitcoin, it's about stability, about longevity, and about security. So you want to be able to stay on the current node or feature set that you are happy with and not have to upgrade. And that seems to be a change in how Bitcoin Core has been working in. It's almost like you need to upgrade because we're not backporting some fixes to older versions now. And by upgrading, you're following along with policy changes and other things. And I think that's personally not a direction I like. I like boring and stable. And that's also why I'm not really into the whole knots 110 thing. Like, it runs counter to my personal beliefs that I shouldn't need to panic about some patch that we're going to push out and it's going to be super urgent. And I think sometimes that's compared to the UASF before, but they're very different beasts. That was an upgrade everyone wanted that was being blocked, whereas this is, we're fixing something that we think is broken and it's very, very urgent, but there's no real strong consensus around that urgency or that this is the right fix. And just to be clear, for not 110 supporters, I support the idea behind it, but I think you have to build consensus and there has to be agreement. Like, Rob, you should be able to talk about it intelligently and say, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Not, I haven't time to look at it yet because it's so rushed and you're busy with stuff. But the timeline, I think, for all these things should be in years. Like, not we're gonna push it out in July or August, and are you in or out? That's just not Bitcoin.
And so this new client that you guys will be developing, is it a push, would you say, towards ossification?
Yes. I think we'll probably do minor bug fixes and just maintain a stable version, focus on security, and backport some things, but generally it is to maintain Bitcoin as it is now without adding new features. And if there is something that is universally desired, like maybe there's an improvement for resistance against quantum computing threats, then maybe we'll release a new version for that. But we're still in talks with the developers that we're talking to about exactly what is the model for this and how we should proceed. But generally, we're more or less aligned that it is about conservatism and having a really strong, robust process to make sure that people are not just changing things willy-nilly and upgrading for the sake of upgrading.
Well, one thing we would need to upgrade for in the future, if it ever does come, is the quantum threat, right? And I've heard you famously say that quantum is a nothing burger. There is no real quantum computer out there that can actually attack Bitcoin. All these gains have been on the theoretical level. Why do you think now quantum has come up in 2026? Or is it just because we need another narrative to talk about?
Well, it's always been coming up. It's not just 2026. Like, you go back a couple of years, there was a big fuzz about it too. And I don't know. I think people are just pumping their own bags. If you look at the recent wave, it's because of a certain VC that invested in this company to help blockchains get quantum ready. So there is definitely a selfish intent there to benefit themselves by pushing this FUD. And oftentimes these types of FUD are amplified by people that are trading too. Like maybe they shorted Bitcoin and they want to push this narrative that Bitcoin is doomed, or it's an altcoin that has some quantum resistance thing already and they're trying to attack Bitcoin to promote themselves. So you have to look at the whole picture. But I think if you're a rational person, you have to say there has to be some proof of the threat. Like there has to be something at least, not just it could come, and it could come very quickly because stuff is advancing very quickly. Like that's just not an argument that any rational person should accept. And you could argue, well, AI will bring quantum computing forward faster, but then AI can also defend Bitcoin in that realm too, because we have tools to speed up research and development as well. And what we've seen as a nice counter to all the FUD is a lot of real practical research coming from Blockstream and a lot of others that are actually tabling very practical solutions to address the future quantum threat.
Yeah, I think one thing that does need to be addressed when it comes to quantum and Bitcoin is the fact that if we are able to create these quantum resistant addresses, the Bitcoin would still be needed to be migrated over, right? You'd still need to move all the Bitcoin to new addresses, and that would take some time. So I think it is smart that if we start at least talking about it now, downplay the FUD that makes it such a dire immediate threat, but make sure that we're also making development. And as you said, Blockstream is doing that. Okay, so now I'd like to switch gears over to regulation here in America. We've got the Clarity Act that Trump hopes to pass this year before the midterm elections. What's your take on Clarity? Do you think it matters for Bitcoin, or is this really just about the banks and stablecoins?
I think the Clarity Act only matters to Bitcoin and it affects market sentiment that the market seems to think it's important for Bitcoin, but I don't really think it's important to Bitcoin. I don't think who the Fed chair is matters to Bitcoin. Nothing really matters to Bitcoin. If you really understand Bitcoin and you understand the mechanism by which Bitcoin exists, then you know that nothing matters. Bitcoin is inevitable, and it's all just narratives of the day that people think will help or not help. But the Clarity Act is really just about fractional reserve bankers wanting to keep doing fractional reserve banking. That's the end of it. They're fighting about stablecoin yield. And this is why it doesn't really have anything to do with Bitcoin, because it's about stablecoins and banks, really. They're duking it out. And I don't really care so much one way or another, but because you can already have yield on stablecoins. It's just on secondary markets. You can lend out a stablecoin and get a yield on it, right? These markets already exist. It's just, can they do it directly, is the question. So it matters for some of the stablecoin issuers, I think, especially the US ones that want to compete with the banks. But for us, for us Bitcoiners, we don't really have a horse in the race. Like either, Jamie Dimon will win, or, some US based stablecoin will win.
Now, it was super interesting last week to see Jamie Dimon sort of his mask come off and say that Brian Armstrong is full of shit and that he's a bad guy and that Jamie Dimon will not bow down to him and that Brian Armstrong is so bad because he's spending hundreds of millions in lobbying money to get this bill passed. So it is interesting to see the bankers tremble when it comes to this. And I know that you're not the biggest fan of Brian Armstrong either, but to see that fight happen out in real time is super interesting.
Yeah, I'll cheer for Jamie Dimon in this case, even though it's kind of gross, but, you have to pick.
Yes. The lesser of two evils, and to you, Coinbase is worse. Interesting. Well, keeping on Wall Street, last week we talked to Matt Cole, and he, of course, is the leader of Strive, and they just had this huge success with SATA, daily dividends, the digital credit product, and he is already planning for a fight with Wall Street and the banks over this. He thinks that digital credit is essentially a run on the banks, right? People, why would they want money sitting in a savings account when it's receiving nothing when they could hold these products? So with that lens, how do you look at digital credit versus Wall Street?
Well, I'm obviously partial to whatever helps Bitcoin adoption and accelerates hyper Bitcoinization. So I think the traditional financial companies have to adapt one way or another. Basically, everything is being pushed. Like the whole digital credit narrative is definitely something I think they should be probably more worried about than stablecoin yield, honestly, because this is much more powerful. And I think we're going to see some of them probably come into this arena, maybe offering something like STRC or SATA, but definitely being more involved in Bitcoin and in offering digital credit products.
And when it comes to digital credit and the narratives around Bitcoin, I think we're aligned that anybody can build anything they want on top of Bitcoin. But also, as a community, we have to ensure that the narratives are still there, at least the ones that we think are the most important and philosophically aligned. So in terms of self-custody versus all these financial engineering products built on top of Bitcoin, where do you think we're going in the future?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, a lot of Bitcoiners they don't like these things. They don't like the concept of digital credit. They don't like strategy. But I think they don't really understand that that is not targeted towards them. They're aiming towards a different market. They're directing these products to people that don't necessarily care about Bitcoin or understand Bitcoin. They just want a dividend. And that's perfectly fine, right? It's not that everyone has to try to educate everyone into having self-custody, because that's sort of a thankless endeavor, right? It's actually very, very hard to get people to buy Bitcoin and take it off an exchange, right? You're fighting two battles here, which is that you have to first buy Bitcoin and second, take custody of it, which is an alien concept for probably 99% of the people on the planet, right? They just know that I buy something, I keep it with some third party. That's the norm. And I think if you want to have an analogy, it's like convincing someone to not use Gmail, but to use some email client and keep their email on their device, right? Like, why? I can just log into Gmail and see everything there. Like, why should I use this other thing and download my mail, right? It's like, that's the battle, really, that is taking place. But again, like, what a lot of the other players are doing is targeting new markets, institutional players, players that cannot have Bitcoin in self-custody or even have exposure to Bitcoin. So I think you have to appreciate what they're doing and that they are expanding the footprint of Bitcoin. They're not necessarily doing what you like, which is getting people to buy and keep it in self-custody, which, just to clarify, I think is the best thing. And we are building Aqua for that purpose. Like, buy Bitcoin, keep it in self-custody. But at the same time, I appreciate that Strategy and other companies are growing the pie, because people that have exposure to STRC might choose to understand what is the mechanism behind it, and they might get down into the rabbit hole and get a book and read about Bitcoin and then buy Bitcoin, right? The same for ETFs. Like, some retired grandma in her 80s is probably not going to pick up a copy of the Bitcoin Standard on her own, but she might see something come up for an ETF, maybe through her financial advisor, and she might buy that. And then she might wonder, okay, well, this thing's performing pretty good. What is it? And they might come into Bitcoin. So I think all roads lead to Bitcoin, and you have to accept that people will do things with Bitcoin that you yourself don't like or think is suboptimal. But the solution to that is, going out and getting them into spot Bitcoin and taking custody of it.
And now I'd like to get a little personal. I'd like to ask you a personal question, Samson. So you are extremely convicted in Bitcoin. You have the facts to back it up, and you're bullish, usually bullish, right? Can you go back into your childhood? When did you get this mindset, this optimistic mindset, and the ability to hold ideas so strongly as you do today?
I don't know if it's from childhood, but I think it's just from learning about Bitcoin that I developed a lot of strong opinions, because the more I think about Bitcoin, the stronger the more it reinforces my mental model of Bitcoin and how it will interact with the world and break down these barriers and change things. So I wouldn't say it's my childhood. I was pretty stubborn as a kid, but I don't think that has anything to do with this. This is more about Bitcoin changing my mind over time and reinforcing just how powerful of a change it is.
And so how do you see us ending 2026? It's been a rough one so far, but how do you see the next 6 months going?
Well, it's difficult to predict. I mean, I've been predicting an Omega candle and 1 million Bitcoin for a couple of years because I see that we're all going to see this massive bull run. Bitcoin is going to 1 million, and I just cannot rationalize how people wouldn't front run that and buy now, sending it up to 1 million well in advance. Because if you look at every single model, Bitcoin usually will hit 1 million in 2030 to 2032. And that's just a few years away. And if every model is pointing that direction, and just a reminder, there is no model that predicts Bitcoin going down. And you have the US debt approaching and crossing 40 trillion soon, and no sign of slowing down, no other avenues to mitigate increasing debt and increasing government spending, you have to come to the same logical conclusion that Bitcoin is going to go up massively. So again, I'm bullish, but you cannot predict the future. If I could predict the future, then I'd be, Elon Musk, richer than Elon Musk. But you never know. It could draw out that we're in sub 100K levels for another year. Who knows? But I think if the markets are rational, then we should start to see a big rebound, and it'll be a fast rebound, because to get to 1 million in 4 years' time, it means we have to go up a lot significantly over the next 4 years.
Well, we saw it in gold, we saw it in silver. Why can't it happen to Bitcoin, right?
Exactly. And I think it's just a matter of time. And this is why I'm really bullish that big things, large market cap assets like gold and silver can double, triple, quadruple. And Bitcoin is more nimble, more accessible, and bearer. And there is no gateway to prevent anyone from getting it now because it's in ETFs. So I could see like $1 trillion flowing in rather easily. And who knows? I mean, if a private company can IPO at $1 trillion, why can't $1 trillion flow into Bitcoin? And that's what you have to really prepare yourself for. The day that all the capital comes to Bitcoin and there's not a lot of Bitcoin left.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest lessons this year, is that if you can see a stock go from 60 billion to over $1 trillion within 12 months, why can't that same thing happen to Bitcoin, right? So just be patient. Just be patient. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that any OG Bitcoiner, such as yourself, can teach to the new guys, is just hold on and you'll be rewarded.
Yep. It's not easy, but you just have to be patient.
All right, Samson. Well, thank you so much for your time today. If people want to find out more about Jan3 and Aqua, where should they go?
We're on X a lot. So Jan3 is Jan3com. I'm on X at Excellion, EXCELLION. And you can go to our website too, jan3.com.
All right. Thank you so much. It's been a year since the last time we chatted on here. I got to have you on sooner than that again. Thank you so much, Samson.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rob. Take care.
If you enjoyed Samson breaking down how digital credit is growing the Bitcoin pie, click right here to watch our latest interview with Matt Cole, CEO of Strive, the company buying hundreds of millions worth of Bitcoin every single week through the sale of digital credit. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.